How to be powerful. So when I was in college, I picked up a book called The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. You may have heard of it. And to this day, Robert Greene is one of my all-time favorite authors. But when I read his book through the perspective of an immature college student, it framed power in my mind as something that is manipulative, corrupt, and something that is only gained by bringing other people down and as a result bringing yourself up, all right? But today my perception is very different. All of that has changed and I understand the truth about what power actually is, okay? Today my negative connotations that are associated with this word have completely gone, and I make it a conscious effort to always be building more power in my life, okay? So in this video, I'm going to reveal to you what power actually is, why you need it if you are to make any sort of impact in this world, and how to actually go about building the most amount of power in your life, okay? So what is power? When most of us think of this word, we think of the corrupt politicians that are trying to manipulate us and get our vote so that they can, do whatever it is that politicians do. But I actually looked up the etymology of this word and found that power comes from the Latin root posse, which simply means to be able, okay? And I looked up power in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, which defines it as the ability to act or produce an effect, okay? So power is simply your ability to produce a desired effect. So if you have any sort of goals in your head, if you have any sort of vision in your head, power is the ability to make that vision, to make that unseen goal, dream, idea that you have in your head and manifest it into this world, okay? So power is a prerequisite for accomplishment, because anything that it is that you want to achieve in this life, you need the power, you need the resources, you need the skills to actually make it happen. Otherwise it's just a pipe dream and it just stays in your head and doesn't end up making it into the real world, okay? So that is the first point to understand, which is that power is simply your ability to make the unseen seen, all right? And the second point that I want to talk to you about right now is behavioral kinesiology, okay? So this is basically the study of putting subjects under the influence of negative and positive stimulus and measuring the strength of particular indicator muscles that the subjects have, okay? So a guy by the name of Dr. David R Hawkins actually used behavioral kinesiology and mapped out what he calls the scale of consciousness, okay? So there are 17 levels on this scale. At the very top is enlightenment, at the very bottom is shame, and right in the middle, what he calls the critical, the critical response point is courage, all right? So anything above this level of courage, any association, belief, thought, any attitude that is above the level of courage makes the indicator muscles of the subjects go strong. Anything below this level makes the indicator muscles of the subject go weak, all right? And they've measured this in many lab experiments, and this is what David R Hawkins actually used to scale out his map out his scale of consciousness, okay? So right below courage are the levels of pride and anger. And if you have experienced anger in the past, which I'm sure we all have, anger actually provides you access to a source of untapped energy, and you may be thinking that it actually makes you go stronger, but this is what David R Hawkins refers to as an expression of force rather than power, right? And now he wrote an entire book titled Power versus Force, and you can definitely check it out. I'll link out to it below. But let's right now dive into what the difference is between power and force, okay? So the fundamental attribute of power is construction, okay? Power is associated with anything that builds up and supports the significance of life itself. Force, on the other hand, is associated with destruction, all right? It's associated with the breaking down of life. So this is because force is always moving against something, whereas power is moving towards something. And if you look at it like this, power is anything that anyone who is involved in the expression of power will come out on top, because power always has to do with win-win situations. Force, on the other hand, is, like I said, is associated with the breaking down in life, and it comes down to a lose-lose or a win-lose situation. Okay, so power really is about building up and supporting the significance of life. So when we think about it, you can look at it like this: power is associated with giving life, giving energy, and supporting everyone who is involved in the process. Force, on the other hand, is incomplete. It's always needing to take energy, it's needing to take life in order to keep the cycle going. Okay, so every time that I am making a decision, I always look at it through the lens of this, whether I'm trying to take something or whether I'm trying to give. All right, because power is total and complete. It doesn't need anything from the outside, and therefore is always just giving forward, is always producing and making sure that it's supporting every single person who is involved. All right, so power is associated with compassion. It makes us feel good about ourselves and about life in general, whereas force is associated with judgment, and it makes us feel negative about ourselves and about life in general. Okay, and higher motivations towards excellence, towards service, give us access to the realm of power, whereas lower motivations of self-interest, of self-gain, push us into the realm of force. All right, so if you want to look at the big picture of it, force appeals to our lower nature, whereas power appeals to our higher nature. All right, and this brings us to the source of true power, which is hope and meaning. All right, so this is basically the belief that giving up something of value in the present will move us towards a better future. And Jordan Peterson writes in his book 12 Rules for Life that if you are disciplined and value the future over the present, then you can change the structure of reality in your favor. All right, so the source of true power really comes from hope, it comes from meaning, it comes from giving up something in the present in order to move towards a better future. All right, so it really comes down to having a vision in which everyone involved in that vision is going to benefit, whether it's for the whole of humanity, whether it's only for your family, whether it's for your co-workers, whatever it is. Everyone involved in that vision is going to be elevating their consciousness as a result of being involved in it. All right, and that is what provides us with the source of true power. And there's actually a very interesting study that was conducted by a Harvard trained researcher back in the 50s, and what he did was he brought a bunch of mice. All right, he put them in the first part of the study, he put them into a tub of water, and just to assess how long they would swim before just giving up and dying. And in the first experiment, he found that the average mouse lasted about 12 to 15 minutes. Okay, in the second experiment, he brought a bunch of mice, and right before the 12-minute mark, he took them out of the water, rested them up, dried them up a bit, and then put them back. And in the second experiment, what he found was that because these rats had hope, because they thought that they might be able to be saved, they lasted 60 hours. All right, they lasted 60 hours compared to 12 minutes. That's a huge difference, and the source of their power really came from meaning, came from hope, from believing that the future would be better than it is right now. Okay, so that is the source of true power, which is meaning and hope. And this brings us to the next point in how you can build more power into your life, and that is by taking responsibility of your perceptions. All right, because if you remember, Uncle Ben actually told Peter Parker that with great power comes great responsibility. But what he didn't mention is that if you flip this quote on its head, you realize that with great responsibility comes great power. All right, and a great example of this is Viktor Frankl. He is basically the author of the book called Man's Search for Meaning. I highly recommend you check this book out. I made a video on it as well. I'll link out to it below. But Viktor Frankl basically survived the worst of all human conditions, right? He survived 5 different concentration camps, and what he found was, in his observations, that yes, all of the prisoners of these concentration camps were going through the same thing. They were going through the same harsh environments, but what separated the ones that actually made it out from the ones that just died were the perceptions and the attitudes that they had about the situation. So the prisoners that actually ended up surviving these concentration camps, they relied less on the external situation, which was everyone was going through the same situation, and they relied more on that inner strength, that inner fortitude, and keeping an eye out for the attitudes that they held towards us. All right, so really it came down to the attitudes that they had towards the situation. And there's a quote from the book, if I am paraphrasing that right now. He writes that everything can be taken away from us, anything can be taken away from us, except the one last freedom, which is to choose our response in any given situation. Okay, and Shakespeare wrote that nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And really what this means is that every single event, every single situation in our life is completely neutral, but the way that it affects us really comes down to the perception that we form about it. All right, so really ask yourself that if you are in a situation that you don't want to be in, and if you have hope, if you have vision towards a better future, then look at your belief system. Okay, look at how many of the beliefs were formed consciously on your own, and how many of those beliefs were actually fed to you from childhood. And just basically look at all the beliefs that aren't serving you and replace them with beliefs that you can use to empower you, so that you can take the right actions and sacrifice what you need to right now to move towards the future that you want. All right, realize that you have to take responsibility for your perceptions if you are to rise above the situation of being a victim in your life and rise into the situation of becoming the creator of your own life's destiny. All right, and this really comes down to creating the future. Right, the best way to predict the future is to create it, and the best way to create the future is to sacrifice everything in the present that is not in alignment with that vision. All right, so if you learned something new from this video, make sure to click the subscribe button, because I release new content just like this every single day, week. All right, I was about to say day. And secondly, if you're interested in about how I was able to enter my personal power from being this skinny, fat, depressed, lonely, anxious, to actually creating a business that allows me to travel the world, I feel confident in my body, and I'm traveling the world in Medellin, Colombia right now, then definitely check out my free case study linked out below, which goes over the 7 factors that separate you from being anxious, lonely, depressed, tired, to being strong, motivated, driven, and inspired towards creating the life that you want. All right, check out the case study. I'll link out to it below as well, or go to tripleyourt.com/case-study. And finally, leave a comment below and let me know what your perception was of power before watching this video, and whether you had any negative perceptions of it. Leave a comment below and let me know about that as well. All that being said, this has been Mo Salim. I hope you got value from this video, and I'll see you soon.